You know how they say your wedding day is supposed to be the best day of your life? The moment you finally step into the sunlight and everything just clicks. I thought I believed that. Truly I did, until I took my first step down the aisle at St. Jude's. The chapel was gorgeous, all stained glass and ancient oak, smelling faintly of old incense and fresh lilies, and my ivory gown felt like liquid starlight around me. I was radiant, trembling, smiling through tears, the whole package. But then, as I got to the altar, maybe 20 steps from saying I do to the man I thought was my future, the whole universe just stopped. It wasn't the music cutting out, though it did, abruptly. It was the sight of him. My dog, Kaiser. Kaiser isn't just a dog, he's a Doberman pinscher, all muscle and shadow. And he was standing right there, right in the center of the aisle, blocking my path like an obsidian gargoyle. His hackles were up, his tail was stiff and low, and his deep amber eyes were locked onto my fiancé, Silas, with a hatred I'd never seen before. He wasn't barking yet, just this low, primal sound, that guttural, dangerous warning that tells you something is fundamentally, terribly wrong. The silence was massive, heavy enough to crush the lilies in my bouquet. I could hear the sharp gasp from my maid of honor, the nervous cough from the priest. Kaiser, I whispered, disbelief freezing the smile on my face. Whose dog is that? Someone hissed from the pews. It was mine, of course, the one who had slept at my feet for 6 years, the one who knew my pulse better than I did. And he was growling at the man I was about to marry. The shock hit me so hard. It wasn't fear, not yet. It was this blinding moment of clarity. He's tried to stop me. To understand this day, you have to go back to how perfect it all seemed. Silas Vance. He was the classic storybook romance. A brilliant real estate developer, impeccably dressed, witty, and he saw me, Avery Thorne, not just the slightly awkward girl who spent more time with her Doberman than with people, but the woman beneath. He swept me off my feet over 2 years, and I truly felt like I'd won the lottery, especially after the loss of my grandfather. My grandfather, bless his heart, had complicated my life with one final, ridiculous condition. I couldn't fully inherit Crestwood Manor, the historic, sprawling estate that held generations of my family's memories, unless I was married. He thought it needed a family, a partner, to run it. Silas, conveniently, arrived just as I was grappling with that legal absurdity. He told me he didn't care about the money, only about me, and I believed him. We planned the wedding in 6 months, an absolute whirlwind. But the closer we got to the date, the more things just shifted. It started subtly, mostly with Kaiser. A Doberman is a protector, yes, but Kaiser was always a sweetheart, a big lapdog in a guard dog's body. Yet, the last week leading up to the wedding, he was a wreck. He stopped eating his favorite kibble, pacing the hall at night, his nose constantly pressed against my bedroom door. I remember trying to calm him the morning of the wedding, my mother fussing with my veil, the room smelling like expensive perfume in last-minute panic. "Buddy," I'd whispered, using the silly nickname I had for him, kneeling down, my dress already pooling around my ankles. "It's okay, boy, it's just excitement." But he didn't wag his tail. He just leaned his massive head into my hand for a quick, desperate moment, then moved away to the window, letting out a low, almost mournful whine. "He's just keyed up, honey," my mother said, but her voice was tight. Even she noticed. Dogs can sense big change. But this was more than change. This was alertness. The real strange moment came right before the car arrived. Silas's best man, Gareth, a slick-haired guy who always looked like he was about to sell you a dubious timeshare, walked through the gate. Kaiser, who was usually just aloof with strangers, went completely rigid. He planted himself between me and Gareth, his teeth momentarily flashing, that deep rumble returning to his chest. "Whoa there, tough guy," Gareth laughed nervously, holding up his hands. "Protective, is he?" I yanked Kaiser back, whispering his name sharply. "Kaiser enough." He obeyed, of course, but his eyes never left Gareth's expensive Italian shoes until Gareth literally backed out of the gate. I dismissed it. Kaiser must just not like the smell of his cologne or something. I was wearing my blinders, see? I was so determined to have my storybook ending, I was ignoring the hero right at my feet. The ride to the chapel was a blur of nervous laughter and white silk. But the whole time I felt this cold, tight knot in my gut, like an anchor dropping inside my stomach. I kept seeing Kaiser's eyes, those deep amber pools filled with panic. And then, just as the car turned the final corner, seeing St. Jude's steeple gleaming under the late morning sun, the driver slammed the brakes. A frantic, thunderous barking. It wasn't the sound of an excited dog. It was the sound of a crisis. I looked up, and there he was, Kaiser, sprinting across the cobble drive, his leash dragging behind him like a broken chain. He'd torn open the back door of the laundry room and run a mile straight here. He skidded to a halt right in front of the bridal car, barking straight up at the grill, a sheer wall of panicked noise. The wedding planner, a woman who lived for control, rushed over, her face white. "Get that beast out of here. Now!" I threw open the door, my gown billowing out. "He's mine. Kaiser, stop it, boy." He stopped barking, but only to plant himself right by my feet, facing the chapel doors. He let out a low, mournful whine, then turned his head, looking back at me, then back at the door, back at me. A clear, frantic plea. "Don't go in there. Don't do it." I knelt down, the panic finally starting to set in. "I don't know what's wrong with him," I stammered to my mother, who was rushing out of the car behind me. I tried to grab his collar, but he pulled back, still fixated on the chapel entrance. That's when I saw Michael, the priest, and Gareth, the best man, standing just inside the narthex, looking out at the chaos. And that's when Kaiser went from a worried dog to a guard dog on high alert. His low growl returned, this time directed squarely at the two men inside. It wasn't enough, though. The show had to go on. My mother eventually managed to coax Kaiser to a back room, promising the planner he'd be secured. I walked into the chapel, the music swelling again, trying to plaster on the beautiful bride smile, but inside I was shaking. I left my protector, my instinct, in a back room. The doors opened, and the light hit me, blinding and gorgeous. For a moment, I forgot everything. The manor, the will, the debt, Kaiser's warnings. It was just me, the music, and Silas waiting for me at the end of the long aisle, looking handsome and composed, everything I ever wanted. I took my first step, then my second. Then it happened. The massive oak doors at the back of the church burst open. Burst open. Kaiser hadn't been secured. He destroyed the latch on the backroom door and charged into the church like a tactical assault unit. The organist froze, her hands hovering over the keys. The collective gasp of 200 guests was louder than any music. Kaiser didn't look back. He didn't hesitate. He ran down the aisle with powerful, silent strides, a streak of black fury. He stopped dead center, maybe 3 feet in front of me, planting all 4 paws, his massive body trembling with purpose. He was blocking me, completely. "Kaiser!" I screamed, the name echoing. My bouquet felt like a ton of bricks. But his eyes weren't on me. They were on Silas. Silas, standing at the altar, looked utterly cornered. His composed mask fractured, revealing a flicker of raw, cold fury. "Get that animal out!" Silas barked, his voice sharp and aggressive, cutting through the silence. "He's ruining everything." That was the moment. That harshness, that pure, icy anger. It wasn't the calm, patient man I fell in love with. And Kaiser, hearing the hostility, didn't flinch. He snarled, a deep, guttural, primal sound that bounced off the vaulted ceiling. He moved closer to me, gently nudging me backward with his massive shoulder, his message clear: "Retreat. I am shielding you." My father rushed forward, trying to grab him, but Kaiser just stood his ground, teeth bared only at Silas. "It's just a dog, Silas. Calm down," I pleaded, tears finally blurring my vision. "It's not a dog, Avery. It's a terrorist. Someone drag it out before I lose my mind." Silas snapped, clutching the lapel of his expensive jacket, his jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might break. The priest raised his hands, trembling. "Perhaps we should pause the ceremony." But Kaiser wasn't finished. He gave a sharp, commanding bark, a sound of final warning. Then he took one slow, deliberate step toward Silas. He didn't lunge for the man's throat, which he easily could have. Instead, his eyes, burning with instinct, locked onto Silas's chest pocket. And that's where we held. That massive silence. Kaiser, poised like a weapon, Silas, sweating profusely, clinging to his jacket, and me, the frozen bride, realizing with a cold certainty that this dog. The second the priest suggested pausing, the tension inside St. Jude's became a physical thing, a heavy, suffocating blanket of disbelief. Silas looked like a trapped animal. His eyes darted between the silent, filming crowd, the trembling priest, and Kaiser, who had reduced his entire world to one simple geometry. You do not pass. Michael, I whispered, using his actual name, the one that meant forever. What is going on? Tell me, what he is sensing. It's just the excitement, Avery. He's a dog. You're letting an animal dictate the biggest day of our lives. Silas's voice cracked, and that crack, that tiny flaw in his perfect veneer, told me everything I needed to know. The composure was gone. All that was left was desperation. Kaiser took another step. Low, menacing. He didn't bark this time. He focused entirely on the fabric of Silas's jacket. He dropped his head, his nose twitching, a small, continuous rumble vibrating in his throat. What's in your pocket, Silas? I asked, my voice barely a tremor. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was trying to claw its way out of my chest. Silas froze. His hand shot up to clutch his lapel again. Nothing. It's nothing, Avery. Just a handkerchief. He was too quick, too defensive. And that was the final cue Kaiser needed. In a flash of black fur, Kaiser lunged. Not to bite, but to seize. He grabbed the fabric of Silas's left inner jacket pocket. A surgical strike, perfectly executed. The whole church gasped. Everyone's eyes followed the small object that tumbled from the torn lining, rolling until it stopped right where the red runner met the cold, white marble. It was a small, sealed glass vial. Clear, but the liquid inside was faintly cloudy, catching the light like a sinister jewel. Silas's face went pure, blinding white. The blood drained out of him entirely. It's nothing. Medicine. My anxiety meds, he stammered, his voice high and frantic, trying to rush forward. But Kaiser was faster, planting himself over the vial, teeth momentarily bared at Silas in a clear threat. Don't touch it. The priest, a kind man named Father Thomas, stepped down, trembling, and carefully used a small ceremonial cloth to pick up the vial. He held it up to the light, frowning. Unlabeled, Michael? This doesn't look like prescription medicine, and it smells chemical. The murmurs became alarms. People were grabbing their phones again, but now they weren't filming the beautiful bride. They were filming the grotesque reality. Security arrived, then two officers who were thankfully already nearby. They took one look at the scene, the frozen bride, the growling Doberman, the sweating groom, and the priest holding a mysterious vial, and knew exactly what they had. One officer, meticulous and calm, put on gloves and carefully examined the glass. He sniffed it once, recoiled slightly, and his eyes hardened. This isn't an anxiety medication, he stated, his voice flat and authoritative, cutting through the whispers like a knife. This appears to be a compound known as tetramine. It's an illegal, powerful paralytic agent. A wave of collective horror washed over the guests. Tetramine, not a prank, not a fainting spell. This was serious. I stared at Silas, my heart shattered into a billion tiny, agonizing pieces. Why, Silas? Why would you have something like that? He looked desperate, lost. It's not what you think, Avery. I swear it wasn't to hurt you. It was... He stopped, swallowing hard, looking at the handcuffs the officer was pulling out. It was just to buy time. Buy time for what, Michael? I demanded, the tears finally flowing, not of sorrow, but of pure, white-hot rage and betrayal. To what? Fake your death. Postpone the wedding a week. Silas hung his head. To postpone the signing of the documents. Avery, you don't understand the pressure I was under. I needed the manor. I needed the inheritance access. My speculative ventures failed. I'm hundreds of thousands in debt, and that damn clause in your grandfather's will. I knew that once we were married, once the title was transferred, you would discover the depth of my failure, the liens on my properties, the lies. I was going to inject a tiny sublethal dose, fake a seizure, put the ceremony on hold for a week, and use that time to somehow make the debt disappear. The church was completely silent again, except for the tiny, ragged sounds of my breathing. "You were going to lie to me in the eyes of God," I whispered. "You were going to betray my trust, my family, for a stupid clause in a will." Silas didn't answer. He just let the officers cuff him, his eyes filled with a sickening mix of shame and self-pity. As they led him away, he threw one final, weak glare at Kaiser. "That damn dog," he muttered. "He ruined everything." He saw the truth before anyone. Kaiser, hearing his name, let out a low, satisfied woof, a sound not of anger, but of confirmation, resting his heavy head gently against my trembling hand. The church emptied slowly, leaving behind only the ghosts of a canceled life. I sat in the front pew, my beautiful gown ruined, my veil crumpled, my hands covered in the faint scent of lilies and cold sweat. It wasn't just a wedding that was canceled. It was a future, a fantasy I'd built on sand. Kaiser sat right beside me, silent now, his body relaxed, his mission accomplished. He didn't look proud or triumphant, just calmly aware. He was simply doing his job. He was my conscience, my built-in furry lie detector. My mother came up and just sat next to me, not saying anything for a long time. She just rubbed my back. "Honey," she finally murmured, "that dog didn't ruin your wedding. He saved your life, not your heart from beating, but your life from being ruined by a lifetime of calculated deceit." I ran my fingers through Kaiser's thick, dark fur. He tried to warn me, I whispered, remembering the pacing, the growls, the refusal to eat. "I thought he was jealous, Mom. I thought he was just being a little dramatic because I was leaving him for a man. I thought it was selfish." Kaiser lifted his head, nudging my cheek with his wet nose, a gesture so simple, so grounding. He was saying, "I'm not selfish, Avery. I am loyalty." The following weeks were a blur of media frenzy, police reports, and the slow, agonizing process of canceling venues and returning gifts. The headlines were insane. "Doberman disrupts dynasty wedding. Uncovers paralytic plot." But I stayed inside, refusing interviews, focusing only on the steady, rhythmic breathing of my guardian. One afternoon, I was looking through old files, my grandfather's things, when I found a dusty old ledger. It detailed how Kaiser, as a tiny puppy, had been trained, not as a show dog, but as a specialized emotional support animal for veterans, trained to recognize the subtle stress cues and minute body language changes associated with deception and suppressed anger. My grandfather, knowing my tendency to trust too easily, had gotten him for me as a silent alarm. Kaiser hadn't been acting on jealousy. He was acting on years of professional, life-saving training that I hadn't even known about. That realization changed everything. I wasn't a victim who was saved by luck. I was a woman who was saved by intentional, unconditional love. I decided I couldn't let this massive betrayal be the end of my story. I couldn't let Silas win by leaving me broken. So, I took the inheritance, the manor which was now legally and entirely mine, and used the foundation to start a new kind of nonprofit, a program dedicated to training rescue dogs to become emotional protectors for people who, like me, had a hard time spotting deception in their lives. One golden evening, about 6 months later, I sat on the massive front porch of Crestwood Manor, now a center for purpose, not just property. The white roses had all been replaced with bright, resilient sunflowers. Kaiser was beside me, his head resting on my knee, his tail occasionally thumping against the wood. "You know, buddy," I murmured, scratching behind his ears, "I used to think true love was about grand gestures, about promises whispered at an altar." Kaiser opened one amber eye, looking up at me with profound understanding. "But now I know it's simpler," I continued, smiling faintly. "It's loyalty. It's protection. It's someone showing up, even if they have to tear down a chapel door to do it, because they see the truth when you're too blind to see it yourself." I finally wrote a note to the public, a short post that went even more viral than the scandal. "I'm not the bride who was left at the altar," I wrote. "I'm the woman who was saved by loyalty. Kaiser is still my guardian, my shadow. He saved me not just from a devastating marriage, but from a lifetime of doubt. He gave me a second chance at my own life, a life built on honest purpose, not on a lie. And that, my friends, is the power of a dog's instinct. It's the purest, most selfless form of truth in the world. So, I have to ask you, watching this right now, have you ever ignored that deep-seated feeling, that gut instinct, only to realize later your buddy was trying to warn you? Maybe it wasn't a dog, maybe it was a friend, a family member, or just that cold knot in your stomach. If you've ever had a silent hero save you from a major mistake, share your story in the comments below. What do you think Avery should do with the manor now? Sell it and start fresh, or keep running the foundation? Let's discuss where loyalty truly lies. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to hear more stories about the silent protectors who walk beside us.